So one thing I realized I haven't done yet in a long video is make Cheong. And if you follow me already, you might follow me from my Cheong videos, which is where I turn sort of fresh fruit into syrups. It's a really popular way of doing it in Korea. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like strictly a Korean method. I've heard of lots of other countries and cultures doing it as well, but it is a popular way of doing it in Korea. In Korean, it's called Cheong. I've been making different types of Cheong for like probably over a year now, and I've made dozens of different Cheongs. The one I haven't made so far, mostly because I haven't been able to get a hold of these, is from Kumquats. And Kumquats are actually one of those Cheongs that's like a classic one in Korea, because Kumquats are pretty popular in Korea as well. I was in Borough Market the other day, and one of the fruit stalls that sells sort of like more unique fruit had Kumquats. These are pretty expensive, which is why I don't actually have that many. Instead of doing a short video where I have to sort of rush a lot, we'll just take our time, make a quick Cheong, and hopefully this turns out really good. Of course, first things first, we've got these Kumquats which I've washed pretty thoroughly and then completely dried out just with a kitchen towel. And the first thing I want to do is actually cut these up. I'm going to take off any of the stems that might be left on. I'm going to cut them up and then we'll weigh them. You could leave these whole and it would still kind of work, but it would take a long time. But because I don't want this to take a long time, I'm going to cut these into halves just so that there's more sort of exposure inside, which will help the sugar draw out all the liquid. Any of these that might be a little bit like manky or a bit weird, I'm just going to cut the ends off of that. And then cut in half. These definitely aren't the best kumquats I've seen. You get much better kumquats in Korea. I don't know where these are from though, where they've sourced these from. I also tried to get ones that were less ripe because I didn't want too much sweetness in these, because we're going to be adding a lot of sugar to this. So anything that makes it a little bit more tart is going to make a much more interesting flavor added when it pairs with the sweetness that we're going to add. We've got one here that was a little bit bruised on the side. As long as there's no mold or fungus on it, it should be okay. I'm going to throw that in. So there's all our kumquats. Doesn't look like much, but it does have a bit of weight to it, so we should be able to get a good amount of syrup from this. So we've got an empty bowl, which is the exact same bowl as this one, so it should be the same weight. I'm gonna zero it out on there. Add this on, and this comes out to about 250 grams, 252, but we'll round it down to 250 just to be easy. So we've got 250 grams of kumquats. So I'm gonna put a fresh bowl on there. And then I'm gonna weigh out 250 grams of white granulated sugar. Now I like to use white sugar because it has no extra flavor to it. You can use something like brown sugar or cane sugar, but that's also gonna impart some flavor from the molasses in the sugar. And for fruits that have more delicate flavor, it can really overpower the actual flavor of the fruit. So for these ones, I'm gonna use white sugar as well, because then we'll get a nice, hopefully orangey color out of this too. So 250 grams of sugar. Perfect. This is always going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. So no matter how much fruit you have, it's always going to be equal weight fruit and sugar. And that's for any fruit as well. I'm just going to get a larger bowl. I'll throw the kumquats in there, get myself a mixing device, and then I'll add about 2/3 of this sugar to the kumquats. Doesn't have to be exact. We can do it slowly over time. I'll add the sugar in and then just give this a mix. Just so that we can start off with like a nice even coating of sugar on all the kumquats. And you'll probably notice that this already starts getting to work, drawing out liquid from these kumquats. And also just the fact that we're tossing this around is making this smell really fragrant and citrusy. I've got myself a clean glass container. You can also do this in plastic as well. A lot of times in Korea they will do this in plastic, but food grade plastic obviously. For this I'm going to use a glass mason jar. And just start transferring everything over. And I'm gonna try and fill in some of the gaps and really pack it down nice and tight so there's less air gaps. Something else I like to use, which if you have one, then go ahead and use it. This is a cocktail muddler. We just happened to have this because we had a cocktail kit somewhere. So I like to just tamp everything down just to get rid of any extra air gaps and stuff. I'll give this another quick tamp down. Try and get some of that sugar back in. And the remaining sugar, just with our spoon, just gonna pour it on top. We want to create basically like a layer of sugar on top, which is gonna protect the top of this. Just to keep it tidy, I'm gonna wipe the top down. A little bit of spilled sugar is fine, totally fine. Now all that's left to do is just to cap this up and then just set this at room temperature on the counter somewhere for a couple days, and you'll notice that it should start becoming more liquid at the bottom, and then maybe in like a week or two, a lot of this will have dissolved as well. But you can really keep this as long as you want, keep it going. It might ferment, it might not. I've really kind of been like hit and miss on whether it ferments or not, but if you're okay with it fermenting, it's totally fine to leave it fermenting. If you're afraid of it fermenting, you can put this in the fridge to try and prevent it from fermenting too much or at all. But I'm gonna leave this at room temperature for now. We'll start off with a week or two, and we'll do a check-in, and then we'll see how it goes.